Hi, friends and family. So I hope you're doing well. I hope this finds you in good spirits. The topic we have today is another in the series on detachment. And so if you like it, if it's helpful to you, I hope that you will like this video. I hope that you will make a kind comment in the section below, in the comments below, and I hope that you will share it with someone else if you know someone else that this could be helpful to. So I want to talk to you today about how you interact with that other person in a detached mindset. When you're working and trying to have a healthy detachment from that person, a detachment is not building a wall. So don't picture it as a wall. I've heard people say, picture it as a fence with a gate where you can decide if you're going to walk through or you're going to let somebody else in. I don't know how you're going to picture it. But don't picture it as a hard brick wall, because I want you to learn how to detach with love. So, maybe detachment with love for you looks like, instead of having them over to your house because you don't know how to get them to leave when you're ready for them to leave, maybe you say, hey, can I buy your lunch? Let's go to that new fish place on the river. Or I don't know, I'm just suggesting, let's go for a picnic lunch in the park. I'll make a couple sandwiches, grab a couple bags of chips and a couple apples, and let's go to lunch in the park. And then you can leave when you feel ready to leave. That's just a suggestion, but there's many things like that. Let's go to the movies. Let's go, I don't know, let's go to the zoo. Let's go sit on a bench and watch the elephants, and visit and chat. And then when you're ready, you say, oh gosh, it's getting late. It's time for me to go. And you can head out. Or if the conversation gets uncomfortable and you can't really figure out how to safely maneuver it, you can be ready to go. But I want to talk to you about when the conversation gets difficult. Maybe they're starting to, and I've heard this a lot, that addicts, alcoholics, they want somebody to blame. They don't want to take responsibility for themselves. And honey, they are never, but this has been my experience, they are never going to blame their drug of choice. The drug of choice, and this is pitiful, but this is the way they see it. It's the only thing holding them together. It's like there's 10 other people in the room, and all 10 of those people can see that the problem, or at least part of the problem, is going to be their unhealthy relationship to a drug. But they're not going to see that. They're going to think that drug, that alcohol, whatever it is the only thing holding them together. Without it, they'd be lost. Without it, they couldn't cope. And that is how they feel in their heart. I mean, I've heard enough AA stories that they literally feel like it is breath that they breathe. So it's a very serious situation. It's a very delicate situation, not one easily approached. But from what I've understood, a lot of times people like that, they want to blame somebody. They want to blame their boss. They want to blame the government. They want to blame the church. They want to blame their mama. They want to blame the wife, the spouse, whoever. So let's talk about taking blame. Let's talk about what mean things they can say, and let's talk about arguing. So just real quickly, you do not have to receive anything someone says mean about you. If it's true, if there's a nugget of truth, or there's a big wad of truth in it, of course you want to try to correct your own behavior, but your behavior does not excuse their behavior. Just like their behavior doesn't excuse your behavior. I'm sorry, it doesn't. You're responsible for yourself. So, unless I'm talking to somebody here that's 8 years old, you're responsible for your own behavior. And you can say all day long, well, I would have been fine if she had been fine. I would have been fine if he hadn't said XYZ. Well, you know what? In the real world, we don't get to determine somebody else's behavior. So we have to be fine. We have to modify our own behavior. We have to decide who we are and how we're going to behave and what standard of social norms we intend to uphold for ourselves, despite the environment around us. So I just want to say that as a grown person, you do not get to blame other people for your behavior. Whether you're an addict or you're not, you don't get to blame other people for your behavior. You can, it just doesn't work for you. Most people are not going to say, well, you know what? Susie Q is a loon and nobody wants to be around her. And she's kind of on the crazy, dangerous side. But it's all Herb's fault, so she's fine. No, they're going to not want to be around you if that is the story. So that's just the truth, regardless of how many excuses you can make or how many ways we can explain it. If you act irresponsibly in social settings, you will be held responsible for your own behavior. That's just the truth. So let's say that person is trying to blame you. They're trying to say it's your fault, it's the way you raised them, or it's, if you were a better cook, let's say it's the spouse. That was my experience as a spouse, except my husband didn't really blame me. So I didn't really have this experience, but I saw tons and tons and tons and tons of people that they were the scapegoat for their alcoholics' problems. So, you weren't a good enough cook. You put on too much weight after marriage. You put on too much weight after you had the kids. You focus too much on the kids and not enough on the husband. You focus too much on the husband and not enough in other places. I don't know. Blame, 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 blame. It's your fault. If it wasn't for the things you did, I wouldn't have done the things I did and I wouldn't be an alcoholic or whatever. You don't have to accept what anybody says to you about you for themselves, like things that are happening in their life is your fault. You just don't have to accept that. You don't have to argue with them, but you don't have to accept that. You can even say something like, well, I'm sorry that that's the way you feel. I'm sorry that that's the way you see it. You can say that. You don't have to argue with them. You don't even have to say that's not true. Well, that's a lie. What good would it do? They're just going to come back and argue with you. You can just say, I'm sorry, that's the way you feel. Because maybe it really is the way they feel. Maybe when they're intoxicated, that's really the way they feel. I've even heard people that, like, when their spouse is sober, they're so kind, they're so thankful. How do you put up with me? I love you. I'll never do it again. You're the best spouse ever. You're the best wife ever. You're amazing. But then when they're drunk, then there's the blame and the calling of names and the verbal or maybe even physical abuse. So I've seen and heard so many stories of how the pendulum can swing, and I'm just telling you, you don't have to receive what anybody says about you. The only person that really gets to define you is you and God. God gets to define you because he's God, and you know yourself better. I mean, I know we trick ourselves. I know we can lie to ourselves. I know we can be self-deceiving. If you have people that love you, that are stable-minded, especially if they're rooted in God's Word, they'd be great people to say, hey, can you help me out with this? I might be having a problem with this. And hopefully they'll be honest with you, and you can work with them or through counseling. If you're having problems, I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm not saying I was perfect now. I'm just saying you do not have to let some sick person, and I say sick with a genuine sincerity. An alcoholic or an addict is sick, mentally and physically, probably. You do not have to let that person define you as a loser, as a failure, as the cause, as the problem, as the source of their alcoholism. It's not your fault. But you also don't have to argue with them. I picture it, and I think I read this in an Al-Anon reading, so don't attribute this to me because I'm not this smart. But it's like, if there's a rope laying there, you don't have to play tug of war with that person. You just don't. You can drop your end. I'm just drop one end. You can drop your end, and it doesn't matter what that person does with their end of the rope. You can just walk away. You don't have to argue. I don't know what they're going to do, but it takes at least two to argue. It might take 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how crazy our families are, but it takes at least 2 to argue. So just don't argue with them. A simple, well, you might be right, or I'm sorry you feel that way. That's really all you have to say. And if that even infuriates them, you might be right, or I'm sorry you feel that way. Just do the best you can to remove yourself from the situation. Now, if it's 2 people, live in the same house, you can't really go home, then maybe you're going to say, I'm going to put my tennis shoes on and take a walk. I'm going to go to my sister's for coffee. I don't know. I don't know what you can do to just remove. I'm just going to go to bed early and read a book. Whatever. Just try to remove yourself from the situation. You don't have to let that person define you. Please try to be mature, and I'm not saying this as a negative toward criticizing you, but try to have, we can get so wrapped up in what that person thinks, and the fact of the matter is their thinking is distorted because of their addiction. So it may not even be the way they feel. Maybe before their addiction they practically worshiped the ground you walked on. Maybe before their addiction they thought you were the best husband or the best mama or the best sister, and now all that's gone away. So that's one way to kind of know if it's really just the disease talking. And if it is, don't try to argue with the disease. It just doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good. If that person gets help and they go through some steps of recovery themselves, they may come to some conclusions on their own, but we cannot force them to come to conclusions on their own. So, an example of that is, if you're convinced, let's say you're convinced that vanilla ice cream is the best. It's the best. And I'm convinced that chocolate ice cream is the best. Nothing better. Vanilla is not even a close second. Chocolate is the best. We just have different opinions. And you're not going to change my opinion. And I'm not going to change yours. We just disagree. And so I'm just trying to give a very simplistic example of how it does no good to argue with someone that has a different opinion than you. So you can respect their opinion. It depends on what you're talking about. If they're throwing daggers at you, if they are blaming you, if they're finding fault with you, if you rolled out of bed different, if you cooked different, if you kept the house different, if you entertained company different, I don't know what, whatever. If you kept the car cleaner, if you would lose 10 pounds, I don't know. But all of that is irrational. It's all irrational, and it's not the truth. And you're going to do everything you can to jump through all those hoops, and it's still not going to do any good. You're just going to be more and more and more entangled, and that just really, what that does, please hear me, it just makes you just as insane as the addict. That's not where you want to be. Somebody in the room needs to be the sane grown-up. Somebody in the room needs to be the sane grown-up. Might as well be you. So please just listen to the things I've said. Just take them to heart. Maybe listen again. Maybe give it a day or two and come back and listen again. If you feel like these things may or may not apply to you, then just take what you like. Take it in the smallest doses that you can take it. Just try not to argue. Maybe you won't do very good at first. Maybe you'll go 5 minutes and then you will jump in. But you'll be like, I held my peace for 5 minutes before I just started going tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat. And then later, you're going to be the one that's so upset. And if your spouse is anything like mine, when he wakes up, he's not even remember a thing. He's not going to remember a thing from when he was drunk. But my husband wasn't the arguer when he was drunk anyway, but he didn't remember anything, hardly. Once in a while I'd say, did you remember that so-and-so happened while you were drunk? And he would be like, oh yeah, I remember that. But, maybe he did or maybe he didn't. But it was very iffy. So possibility you're going to have a big argument that they're not even going to remember when you're finished. So, and I don't know, that's the truth. Maybe your alcoholic always remembers. I don't know. But it just does no good. Just like I can't convince you that chocolate's the best and you can't convince me that vanilla's the best. We can't change each other's minds by arguing. So what you can do is lay them lovingly in the hands of a loving God and wish them the best, hope for them the best, pray for them the best, pray that they get the help they need, pray that they seek recovery, and know that you are not the solution to the problem. And that should be freeing for you. We've talked about this in other videos, that you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. So just let it go. It's bigger than you. Live your own life. Live it to the best you can. Keep your own self as healthy-minded as you can. Rooted and grounded in reality. and in God's word, and just know that God is on the job. He loves your loved one more than you do. And if we will get out of God's way, it's very likely that good things are going to happen. So until next time, this is Gina. I hope this was helpful. I pray for you all the time. Pray for everybody that may or may not, but may watch these videos, and that they would be helpful to them. And until the next time, I love you, and I'm praying for you. Bye.